All right, Alex, finally in person. It's been, like you said, probably 5 years
Dude,
since the first one, but sick to be able to do these in person. So
it's so crazy, man. Like we've been talking about this for such a long time. I mean, I don't know how many people you just send Instagram reels to, whether it be funny stuff or just good stuff, and you're just like, hey, we can make this work. So now I'm glad this finally found out. So.
Yeah, sick. I'm stoked to just happen to be in Houston. That's so random because I try to line these things up, and honestly, scheduling is one of the toughest things I have to do.
Yep.
Especially when you have a location that's not your hometown or something, and it's not a city that a lot of people come through.
Yep.
Obviously, a lot of people come through here, but I don't know. Powerline industry and this city, it's not flowing with people coming through it in this industry. So yeah, super dope to have you here. Give me a current snapshot of who you are, a little bit of background, and what you do now.
So my name's Alex Lacey. I've been in the safety kind of in risk world for going on close to 10 years now. Right now I work for a large insurance brokerage as a risk consultant. And obviously there's different facets of that have aspects of safety. A lot of my job is kind of looking at the post once an accident or incident occurs and trying to kind of find the needle in the haystack to determine what risks are occurring more frequently and how can we help them, whether it be to better educate, better coach, or look at potentially changing operations so that they hopefully don't have those risks occur more frequently. That obviously helps from the insurance standpoint. Prior to that, I worked actually within the Quanta family for a little bit. So I worked with a subsidiary for Power Electric called Longfellow Drilling. Was there for about 2 years. Before that, I was in college at Murray State. One of the best safety and health programs in the nation. I'll tip that cap where it needs to be. Interned actually with Quanta, one of my internships. So it's kind of nice to see kind of go full circle. And then before that, I was a search and rescue swimmer in the Navy. So I always kind of say my job has been somewhat safety and health for a long period of time. I went from actually saving people's lives to now I get to kind of help my clients, not have their clients not having their employees be in danger. So it's kind of cool how it's turned full circle.
Do you still swim? I know, random question.
Yeah,
off topic.
Yeah, I do on occasions. It's one of those things you just never kind of lose.
Yeah.
Big into Olympic weightlifting and stuff like that. Obviously, CrossFit, things of that nature. So, I work out when I can. I travel so much that hotel gyms are as good as they come by. So I drop into gyms and boxes as much as I can just to kind of get my hands on a barbell.
Yeah, I was just telling my girlfriend the other day that I want to learn how to swim. She's like, you don't know how to swim? I'm like, of course I know how to swim, but it just it looks a bit silly. I don't know how to swim. And it's something that, I don't know, it's been on my mind lately is I kind of want to learn how to actually stay straight in the lane.
It's an art form.
Yeah.
If you don't do it, and there's so many different strokes, but my youngest, he did swim for a while before he kind of got out of it. And I was like, yeah, I can still do that. And my wife was like, no, you couldn't. You'd be dry heaving once you got out of the pool. I was like, yeah, I probably would, but I was like, I could hang for a little bit.
Right though, it's a really good workout, and you just talked about it's hard when you travel to go work out, right? Hotel gyms kind of suck, but there's always a pool or a pool nearby. I don't know. It's just been something hey, get a good workout in. 20 minutes in a pool, you probably slam a pretty decent cardio workout.
Oh yeah, it's one of the best conditioning workouts you can do, and I mean you're going to burn a significant amount of calories, and you really don't kind of feel it afterwards because it's a true full body movement. So,
all right, back to safety and risk. What's the current state of safety in the industry?
Man, that's such a great question. So I'll say this: when we look at safety and risk, it's this huge kind of ever flowing metric that everybody's kind of shoot for. And I will say that 10 years ago, if you would say, hey, this is where we're at, nobody would have even thought about it. I would also venture to say that 20 years ago, we would look at where we're at and go, that's wrong. But I also look at it that we were looking at safety metrics differently back then. The human performance methodology that is kind of just transpired safety of just knowing that, employees just don't come into work thinking that, hey, I'm going to get hurt today, or I'm going to cause a forklift accident today. Nobody thinks about that, right? They don't come into work to cause an accident, but they also know that like mishaps do occur. And I think we have got better individuals into the safety and health, upper echelon of safety leadership positions, whether it be National Safety Council, ASSP, things of that nature. And even, at companies and client specific, like we are pushing the knowledge of where we want to be. And it's helping. It's significantly, making clients and companies better. You're not seeing, massive fatality trends, massive severe injury trends, amputations, things of that nature. They're still out there, but I think we are on the right track, and it's just a slow uphill climb.
What industries do you deal with primarily?
Man, across the board. Okay. Yeah. So, I work in pretty much the lower 48 states, and if you can think it, I touch it. So whether it be construction, manufacturing, industry, chemical manufacturing, aerospace. I mean, I get to see the best of the best across the board. And I love that about my job because, when you're on, when you work in a manufacturing setting, right, it's the same thing every single day. Whether it's I use the analogy of a paperclip manufacturer. They're making a paperclip every single day. That doesn't change. Well, for me, I may be this week going and visit a client that builds this, and then the next week I have a client that's doing a major construction project on a bridge. Or I may have a client who has a chemical manufacturing where they're making components of something that I would have never thought of. So I love that. I get to see ins and outs that maybe they do exceptionally well, but maybe they could improve in X, Y, and Z, and I can kind of pull from other clients to kind of help them from that. So that's really the best thing that I get to tell.
Do you see trends to like transcend across industries?
Absolutely. Yeah. So when you're thinking about like, from a workers' comp standpoint, it's always kind of like the top four: sprains and strains, slip, trips, and falls, caught in between, cuts and amputation, things in that nature. If they're material handling, they're physically handling stuff. So those are kind of like the top four. It doesn't matter really the industry. And that's tough because until you remove an individual, that you're going to have those trends. And obviously you don't want to become an automation system where it's a robot lifting a piece of material, but we have to make sure that you're educating them, the employee and the clients, so that they go, hey, this is a risk. Have you thought about, can they do this differently? Can you lower the amount of time that they're manually having to pick this up, or can you reduce it so that they're doing it more efficiently? So you got to kind of think of it from that perspective. So
do you try to attack this from like a higher level than just the individual on the floor doing the thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, most of the time, like when I'm working with my clients, I'm talking with, upper executives, sometimes C-suites. It really just kind of depends on the nature of it. So I'm kind of looking at it from a broad perspective because they're seeing the data. They know if they have safety accidents, OSHA violations, things of that nature. So I'm kind of like working through, what can I bring to the table that's going to add the most value for them? Because I could say, hey, you could remove this, but I know that's not feasible. Or, hey, you could do this, but that's going to be a $4 million investment. So it's got to be kind of a cost benefit analysis. What makes the most sense, both now and potentially 3 to 5 years from now. AI is kind of like a big one that a lot of companies are talking about, and they don't want to do it now because it's very costly. But I keep kind of pushing and saying, hey, if you don't do it now, AI will look vastly different 3 years from now. So prime example is like cameras in trucks. So there's a lot of companies that have cameras in trucks, and I'm sure there's a huge backlash, especially on the power side, because you hear it and I hear it too, where it's like, I don't want somebody sitting behind a computer all day and they're monitoring me. Well, that's not the intent. The intent is to be able to kind of look and see like, hey, this truly wasn't your fault. And if we didn't have the camera footage, we couldn't if we had to go to court, we couldn't get rid of this. So there's so many things that are just like changing both the safety and the insurance market, that it's drastically, you have to be ever changing and really know what's going on with every industry. As the power sector may be here, the manufacturing industry may be here, and how do you blend those two and communicate them together?
The capacity model teaches a lot about like managing risk through looking at the potential release of energy, right? Mm-hmm. And blocking that potential release of energy or whatever. Like, I don't think that a lot of people understand what risk is.
Oh yeah.
So like, help us understand risk, and why is risk, understanding risk more important than memorizing?
So funny you should say that. So I still think risk is a very hard word to understand, because if I asked you what your definition of risk is and I gave you mine, mm-hmm. and if I asked 10 other people that could be in this room, everybody would have a different definition. So I went down this rabbit hole about a year or two ago, and I was like, I think I'm going to make an analogy for risk, so that when I'm talking, whether it be with clients, frontline supervisors, or the guy who's been here for 2 days, I can be like, hey, this is how I view risk. You may look at it differently, but this is kind of my idea. So this is what I have, and it's R is recognizable work exposure. Obviously, what hazards you have to deal with on a day-to-day operation. I, insufficient planning or procedure. S, subpar work practices. And K are key indicators, obviously leading, lagging indicators, things of that nature. And when you kind of break it down letter by letter, you're able to look at it and go, I know that this employee that's been here for 1 day is going to look at risks so much differently than a 10 to 15 year tenured employee, because they've been accustomed to doing the trade or the habits, and the risk kind of shrinks a little bit. It's still there, but they understand the hazards. Whereas if you get a very green employee, they're looking at everything like, oh my gosh, there's all these things that I could potentially have hazardous interactions with. What do I even do? And as you get older and more tenured, you kind of operate with your blinders on, and you're kind of just centered, focused on this one task. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but you kind of have to take those blinders back off, because there's so many more hazards that are always around you. You take the construction aspect. It could be sunny and 75 at 10 a.m. and then 45 minutes later, it's pouring down rain and you've got lightning. And then you got to worry about, obviously, additional slip, trip, and fall hazards. You got the weather you got to worry about. You got to worry about, material falling from your hands because it's wet. So, yeah, risk is one that I think, as the safety world changes continually for the better, people are going to start to understand risk a little bit more as well.
You're right. Especially if we just look at like the Powerline industry. So look, like all of the potentially risky situations that are way more risky than just the average person in the job that they do in an office building, doing some accounting or something. Yep. I always use that one as the example, but there's so many different things that can get you. So help those guys understand risk.
Yep. More. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's not just understanding the risk. It's understanding the process of how they're looking at their task and their job that they have to do. Because using the Powerline industry, those guys and gals are phenomenal individuals. They do some things that just don't seem plausible at times. And you're just like starstruck. But if you break it down bit by bit, there's so many facets of risk that within each thing. As far as getting in their truck and driving to the job site, driving to the right of way, there's risk that's involved there. And then once they get there, there's risk in setting up the job site. There's risk in doing X, Y, and Z. There's risk with having a first-year apprentice. I mean, there's all these different areas of risk. And as you have a strong team and a strong leadership, like, you can be able to take more risk on. But at some point, it's like, how much is too much? And how much do I need to kind of like share that risk with other individuals?
When you look at safety, what's your like your personal philosophy on it? Like compliance versus non-compliance safety. Like, I guess what I'm getting at is how much training or how much more training should organizations be doing to help mitigate risk versus just policing?
Okay, so that's a great question. I'm going to kind of break it down in a couple different ways. So obviously there is a compliance standpoint that you have to kind of meet from an OSHA, MSHA, whatever guidelines you kind of fall under. So there's the bare minimum there. I do believe that companies can kind of take it above that if it's state or federal guidelines. OSHA never hits you for doing more. They're always going to hit you for doing less. So I think if you want to kind of build a strong safety culture, you can always do more. Is there a negative with doing a boatload of safety training? Absolutely. If it doesn't add value, you want to make sure that there's value being added to it. You're obviously going to bring in crews out of doing the work or stopping production, things of that nature. So there has to be some kind of value added to it. If you're just doing, basic safety training, I don't know, let's say there's 30 safety trainings you're doing a year over 365 days. How much value is that adding? Are you talking the same topics, or are your employees just kind of reading a toolbox talk that doesn't add anything to it? So there's got to be some meat behind it. I kind of tell some of my clients, like whenever they're having these conversations, try to find somebody that can like tell a story that pulls to the heartstrings. Like it doesn't have to be something that happened at this very facility, but I use an example all the time of using a ladder when putting up a Christmas tree. So my wife, God love her, when we moved into our newest house, she wanted a big Christmas tree because we've got a real tall ceiling. So I did what every husband should do is I get the Christmas tree. Well, I don't have a 16-foot ladder. I got like a 10-foot, and I didn't want to go pay for a 16-foot ladder because they're expensive. So as you can imagine, I did what I've told 1,000 different people not to do, right? Don't sit on top of ladders. Don't stand on top of the ladder. So we're putting the Christmas tree together, and like I'm putting one of the segments on, and I see her with the phone, and she's taking a snapshot of it, and I'm like, I need you to delete that right now. I know it's probably sitting out there in the cloud somewhere, but like those are the things like I can't tell you how many times like I've had those conversations both when I was on the safety side and even now like as a consultant. Like I have said or seen it 1,000 times, but it still can occur to me.
Yeah.
And like it's just I didn't make the educated decision to go, I know this isn't right. The right thing would be to either go by a ladder, or what we've actually done now is we push it over to the stairs, and we will go over to the banister and we'll reach over and set the next section so we don't have to worry about falling. It's probably not the best way, but it's still better than me standing on top of the ladder. So yeah, it's a tough one. Like you want to be compliant to an nth degree, but you also want to understand like, do our employees truly understand the risks that they are associated with? I would venture to say that if you're in the power sector, you know what the risks are. There's so many that it's almost endless. And it can get monotonous at times and also complacent at times. So that's going to be something that they're going to hear over and over and over again. Is it energized? Is it not energized? Do we have the right PPE? Did we inspect our PPE? And they just need to understand like there's a method to the madness, because if you don't have those conversations, and I think we're going to get to this at one point, when you stop having that communication, that's when things start failing and failing drastically.
How do you get better at hazard recognition? And then what causes complacency?
Man, two-parter. So with hazard recognition, I think you need to be able to take your seniority and throw it out the window. If you've had an employee who's been there for 20 plus years, or a guy or gal that's been in the industry for 30 years, he or she has probably seen everything. And as much value as they bring to the table, you got to throw it out the window for a little bit, because these younger guys and gals that are coming in, they're seeing things bright-eyed and completely, they're asking questions. And one of the kind of training environments that I've done is when I'm talking to the employees is I go, hey, like, you got to imagine they've never seen this before. And they're going to ask questions, and they may ask them wrong, but they're not asking it in a challenging way. They're asking it in a way of, can you teach me why you're doing it this way? And they may bring up a logical reason of, hey, is there any reason why we can't do it this way? Again, it's not challenging. It's not saying that your way isn't the right way or the best way, but that's when you flip it and you're kind of a more tenured, more seasoned employee, you can go, hey, that's a great question. This is the reason that we do it this way. Now, in a perfect scenario, that happens, but we know that that doesn't happen, because what typically happens is you have a younger employee that says, hey, is there a reason we do it this way? And a more seasoned employee goes, we're doing it this way because this is the way we're supposed to do it. And they don't coach or teach them. And that's where I think we kind of like fail sometimes. It's getting better, really across all industries. It's just, how do we coach that communication between the age brackets, because everybody learns a little bit differently, especially when you've got the millennials, the Gen X, the Gen Ys. That's a big one.
Actually, on this thread, before you get into complacency, how do you manage that or coach your leadership into understanding this about the trade workers or the industry workers, like the actual boots on the ground, physical hands on things, moving things, doing things? How do you help coach that understanding? See if I can get this right. Leaders, kind of like leaders in the past, they built these companies, but they used to be the person that actually did the job, right?
Yep.
And then they built these companies and they become this person, this leader of this organization, but they still have that understanding on how the work got done.
Correct.
Like the finer details of it. They understood the hazards, and so they had that connection. But now it's almost like that's that boomer generation. They're retiring, they're moving on, and maybe the people that are taking over their organizations didn't come from the field.
Correct.
They came from business backgrounds. They came from whatever backgrounds, but they never actually had hands-on experience.
Yeah. So what I would say for that is if I'm working with a company or a client and there's maybe a disconnect there, I want to try to educate them without making them feel like I'm humiliating them. And that's a tough one, right? Because they're in that position for a reason. You would expect that they understand the business, no matter what type of industry that they are in. So, getting them on the floor, out in the field, and saying, hey, like, we need to look at these problem areas and kind of see from that individual's perspective of, hey, you say this is being done this way, but in reality, it's not. And we know that happens all the time. You have this SOP of operations of this is how we do our things. But we also know there's this very, very thin gray line in between that of what's safe and what's unsafe. And we border between that very, very carefully. Yeah. Is it the right thing to do? Probably not. But we also need to understand, like, how thin is that line? If it's a pretty thick line and we can kind of waver in it pretty easily, okay, that's an understandable. But if it's really thin and a very small mishap could happen and you could have a catastrophe of an injury or a major incident, whatever it may be, we've got to look at that and then determine, like, hey, how do we put in preventable items so that we don't have to get close to this line anymore? And that's a hard conversation to have, because you ultimately want an executive or someone in those leadership positions to understand their workforce. Most of the time that happens, but you will have some gaps in between that. Because
the gaps from what I've seen are just hazard recognition, risk recognition, and just like understanding that line.
Yep.
But then the ones that can actually make the difference in the end are the leadership. They can choose a bunch of things. They can choose to ignore it. They can choose to put more rules in place.
Yep.
They can choose to develop barriers, or they could choose to develop training or find training that exists to train the worker force. Anyway, I just wanted to highlight that because like I think that that's a big component of it, is that disconnect between leaders kind of like ignoring the fact that this risky work is happening, or these potential hazards are out there, and the guys are just getting the work done. So we'll just let them keep going.
So I'm going to challenge you on that one a little bit. I think the operational team is the one who really kind of like hones in and really can own it a little bit more. I use the example, so in the safety world, everybody hates hearing, hey, why are you doing it this way? Well, I'm doing this way because I've always been doing this way. Upper executives can't stand that. And then I'll flip it when I'm sitting at the table with them and I go, well, are you still bidding jobs the same way? And they kind of look at me and it's like, well, yeah. And I go, well, what's changed since then? Well, this, and this has changed. Well, if you're still building jobs the same way, they're going to, but the expectation is to do it differently. There's a little bit of disconnect. I think the operators, like if you're in that operation standpoint where you have kind of that free-flowing communication both up and down to those frontline supervisors and everything, that is such a key area of, hey, this has changed. This procedure has changed. This tool has changed. We've got to do this because of OSHA regulations, whatever it may be. They're kind of like that true middle management where they can kind of drive it to the next level. Now, of course, frontline supervisors are the ones that got to drive it home. They have to be the ones that own it. They got to be the ones that, like, if they see Billy Bob and he's out there and he's using a tool improperly, they got to be the ones that fix it. But they also got to ask the questions, well, why was he using it improperly? Was it the right tool? Did he need a different tool? Did we even need that tool? You know, kinds of things of that nature.
What causes complacency in the industry?
Man, my first initial thing of what complacency is lack of communication. I think communication is arguably the biggest thing that can fail an organization and let complacency sink in. I've done a training for some clients before, and I kind of laugh when I say it. I'm like, I would argue you give me a good bourbon and we could talk about it from now until the end of time. But I think complacency is what sets, or not complacency, but I think communication is what sets good companies apart from not so great companies. And if you don't agree with me, I'm going to point you to basically every single war was won and lost by lack of communication. You don't agree with me there, I'm going to point you to World War II and Pearl Harbor. We didn't get funnel great communication in when we knew the Japanese were going to attack us. And what happened? It was the start of World War II, basically, for us. Now, that's not always the case, but once communication stops, whether it be from the top down or the bottom up, complacency sits in. I don't think you can over-communicate. I would rather get 1,000 emails a day and allow me to kind of sift through it to determine what's the most important than not get any emails and then 2 weeks later find out that there is a major issue. Now, there are definitely people different than that, where they only want to know about the X, Y, and Z. And I understand that, especially like once you get into the top echelon and you're, you got a 3 letters behind your name, you're getting thousands upon thousands of emails all day. So you need the short, sweet, to the point. But it is crucial, like once communication stops funneling, top down, bottom up, you're going to have some issues. And that's when complacency really sits in.
I like that. Communication is a huge topic.
Oh, yeah.
I love talking about communication because it's like a topic it's like a word like safety. Like, What does it even mean? Like, what is good communication?
Man, good communication. So I've got a mentor, and he gave me this quote years ago when I was at Murray State. He came in, he used to work with 3M, and he did this leadership summit for us. And I sat in on it and I was hooked from immediately. And was able to stay in contact with him. We're pretty good friends now. And he actually had me come back and help teach that session a couple of years ago. And this is how I look at communication. If you and I are having a conversation, whether you're a supervisor to me or I'm a supervisor to you, it is better to be interesting than interested. Let me rephrase that. So I said that backwards. It's better to be interested than interesting.
Gotcha.
So the idea is if someone is coming to you with a problem, they want to, one, be heard. And most of the time when we're having a conversation, you're already thinking 2 to 3 steps ahead of, I'm going to give you your response of what you need, and you can go about your day. Sometimes it's just, hey, let them vent. Hey, I fully understand this, to the point where pause for a couple seconds and then kind of regurgitate the question that they ask. Hey, I want to understand you correctly. You told me that you were having issues with X, Y, and Z. Is that right? And then you go, yeah, that's correct. You're like, okay, well, have you thought about doing this? You're giving them the response that you were going to give them anyways, but you're giving it to them in a manner that isn't just quick, fast, and in a hurry, get out of the way and go back to doing what you're doing. You're giving it to them in a form of, I heard you, I understand you, and I think that this will help you. And that's where I think, like, as the environment for all workforces, doesn't matter the industry, doesn't matter the trade, it really doesn't matter. That goes to the extent of like how you talk to your spouse, how you talk to your kids, like, because I can't tell you how many times like my son has asked me for something, I'm like, it's right there. Sometimes we just got to take those couple extra seconds, be like, I want to make sure I heard you right. You're having issues with math because of this, and this. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. Well, let's walk through this. And I'm not the best at it, but I try. And I think if we can continue to try, no matter what our age is, communication is something that we can always be better at it. Nobody is the best at communication. I mean, they've got competitions for it, but I would argue that like it's a craft that if you don't work on it, you can fail so miserably, not only within the workforce, but I mean, in your home life, everything.
I love this. I love the topic. I actually think that a lot more safety incidences could have been prevented if you'd had better communication.
Absolutely.
But how many times do you see your workforce in a training for being a better communicator?
Oh yeah, you don't. It's a hard thing to do because
you see first aid training, you see fucking equipment operating training, you see forklift training, you see all of these trainings. How many times have you ever seen an employee learn how to public speak, learn about voice inflection, learn how to? I was talking to a lineman here a couple of days ago we were talking about tailboards. I asked him some sort of question like, what do you think is the most important way to deliver a tailboard, or what's the most important aspect of the tailboard, something like that. And he went off about something, and I said, I think it's actually about the delivery.
Oh yeah, I would agree with that.
If you stand up at the front and you're holding this clipboard and you're looking at your feet and you're talking real slow and monotone and kind of shy, and like, are the people in front of you listening to what you have to say? No, like you're not communicating that like effectively, right?
Yeah. It's such a hard one because it's one of those areas where like you're kind of criticizing people, like, hey, you don't communicate well. Like nobody wants to hear that as a spouse, right? Like my wife's like, hey, you're not listening to me. I'm like, oh.
But again, it's like, what does that even mean?
Yeah, right. Like how do I get better? Like I hear you and I'm giving you the response, but sometimes it's like, yeah, you hear me, but I need you to listen to me. And I think hear and listen are kind of two different words. Most probably
they are 100% two different
most of the guys and gals out in the field, like when they're getting a tailboard, like they hear it, but are they listening to it? You give the example of like, what's the most important part of the tailboard? When I was on that side of the house, I would tell our foremans and GFs, I was like, hey, give it to the youngest guy. You can write it out. Write out half of it. Give it to the youngest guy. Let that person give the speech. And then just give him some examples of like, just give him some feedback. He might kill it. He might completely botch it. But like those experiences that you don't get if you're not given the opportunity, like that's how you get better. And it's so hard to be able to communicate because I hate saying this, but we have people who are not good communicators. And it's a very hard thing to get better at. And
yeah, because you have to practice it. You have to actually learn the skills of being a communicator, and then you have to practice them. Mm-hmm. And I don't think I've never come across somebody in this industry that's actually done that. Those two things, like taken a course or read a few books on being a good communicator. They read leadership books all day long, and I know there's correlations between the two.
Yep.
And they talk about being a good communicator in leadership books, but they're not just a book on communication.
So funny. My undergrad at Murray State was in organizational communication, so public speaking, and so I've done more than a fair share of courses on it. And it's funny because most of the time the building block is understanding the problem or the question that arises, and then trying to build within your thought process of what you want to get your answer to. Now, I think in the safety and risk world, like we ultimately want to get the other individual to get there before we do. Because if I just say, hey, this is wrong, you got to do this, that goes in one ear and out the other. I had a safety manager when I interned for another company before I interned with Quanta. He told me, he's like, if you can get them to answer the question that you want or get them there first, you've made leaps and bounds. And he always would give the example of, hey, if you could do this another way other than the way that you're doing it, how would you do it? And I think that that's like just a great segue of they know they're probably in the wrong. And now you've got them thinking, how could I do this differently? You didn't give them the answer. You didn't give them a result. They've got to start thinking, well, I could do this and this. Like, okay, perfect. If you could do this and this, what stopped you from doing it this way? And then you find out like he needed a 16-foot ladder and it's all the way across, the facility, and he didn't want to walk 20 minutes to get it. Okay, well, now we add a second or third ladder at different locations so we don't have to walk. And there's only one ladder that it was being used. So you kind of start piecing it together, and it helps drastically.
I have one book I recommend 1,000 times on this podcast, and I recommend it, and people think I'm just recommending it to people who like public speak or talk for a living like I've done. But it's really for everybody. If you deliver a tailboard, you should read this book. It's by Larry King. It's called How to Talk to Anyone, Anytime, Anywhere.
Such a great book.
It's the most boring book to read, but it's like paper thin.
I call those the toilet readers.
It's perfect though. It's extremely tactical.
Yep.
It talks about body language. It talks about eye contact. It talks about voice inflection, like when you raise your voice, when you lower your voice, like how you speak to somebody. It talks about leaning in instead of leaning back, leaning into somebody's conversation. It talks about listening with intent, with the intent to actually listen, not the intention to just form your own opinion and say it back so you didn't hear. That's that hearing versus listening thing. Like I heard you, but I didn't listen to what you're actually saying, right? Giving people space to talk, giving people just space to think, and being okay in the silence. I love it. So any other recommendations, communication books?
So I got a couple. Me, I've got a pretty wide selection of books at the house. I got to a point where when I was traveling so much, I'd pick a new book up every time I went somewhere. My wife got mad at me because I went like 2 years in a row where I had like 200 books and I had to build my own library. So the first one, which I would recommend to anybody, it doesn't matter if you are a day one employee or a CEO executive, it doesn't matter. Turn the ship around. It's a phenomenal book. It's about a young Navy lieutenant who takes over as a flagship for an amphib, and he uses the example of it was like the worst of the worst, and he wound up like turning it into the true ship of the ship that like everybody wanted it to model after. There's some great examples of just like how he was trying to work with his staff and the younger sailors to truly understand what is wrong and how can we get this better so that it's operating at full potential. Arguably one of the best books. I read it probably once a year.
Was that the one where he attributed a large portion of the success to just coming on the loudspeaker every
Yep.
morning for like 5 minutes and
Yep.
giving some sort of course and direction
Yep.
and like nothing crazy, but
Yep.
just like, hey, this is our mission for the day.
Just giving them the guidance. Yeah, it's a phenomenal book. I was trying to actually find one, and I was going to give it to you, but I'll ship it to you. Any of Jocko's books. You know me. Jocko's the man. I like essentialism, especially if you're dealing with a lot of tasks. It helps you try to understand like what's the most important and kind of like idea, like these are the 5 or 6 things that I need to tackle for the day, and the rest kind of like I can put off on the back burner. Split the Difference is another really, really good one. It's a former kind of like counterintelligence from the CIA where it's really about the art of communication. He dealt with like hostage rescue. It's a phenomenal read. It's even a better listen on Audible, just because he kind of really goes through the steps of like, this is why you say it this way and not this way. And then The Infinite Game. So as much as I'm kind of in with data, Simon Sinek is really good for me. The good thing about Simon Sinek is you can pretty much watch his YouTube speeches and it's carbon copy for his books. So those are kind of like my top 4 or 5.
I really believe in this heavily, that if you want to separate yourself in the industry, like so many guys like, what can I do to, get better, get paid more, whatever. Because that's what we all want to do in the end anyway, is make more money as well, right? Is pay more attention to the softer skills. Like, you're going to learn line work doing line work, right? You're going to learn a few secrets that'll make you the best lineman out there, whatever. You'll think you're the best lineman anyway. But if you can learn leadership, if you can learn communication, these sorts of things are going to set you way above everyone else because the bar is pretty low.
Yeah. So one thing I've been kind of telling my oldest, who he's a junior in high school, trying to get ready to hopefully go play college soccer. And he always kind of sees me, when I'm working from home, whether it be in the books or, working late, sending emails, and he'll ask me, he's like, why do you work so hard? And I was like, well, one, I have a drive that I can't turn off. I go, I don't see that in a lot of people. And it's a hard thing to coach, but if you can have a drive where you want to be better and not better than everybody, there's this bad stigmatism where you kind of like want to be the best, but it's you want to improve yourself better. How is that? Maybe you want to eat healthier. Maybe you want to work out more. Maybe you want to go back to school. Maybe you want to get a certification. Maybe you want to work on communicating and read more, things of that nature. Like, find you something that you can gravitate towards, and it's going to make you better both in your job and not in your job, maybe at your home life. And I think that would be some key takeaways that I would say could drastically improve.
Okay, let's talk about tactical communication. Like, how does communication fall apart on a job site?
Man, I think it can fall apart in a couple different ways. So obviously, you have kind of like the project scope. And if the right people aren't involved in that from the beginning, whether it be the safety team, the management team, frontline supervisors, things of that nature, and they don't give hey, this could be an issue, or hey, have you thought about this? Hey, we know we're going to have to bring concrete trucks in, and there's a country music concert that's going to be preventing them from getting here on time. Have we thought about that? You got to get the right people on the table. And then it gets down to when you're actually doing the job and the task, is your equipment right? Do you need to do preventative maintenance on it? Have you not? And if it's not being done and you got to figure out why, or it's being done and you need better equipment and that message isn't getting relayed up to the frontline supervisor, or that frontline supervisor is not relaying up to the ops team or the safety or the management team, whoever it may be, however that kind of communication flows. Like, you've got to know what is going on, not day to day, but like prior to having that hiccup. Because once that hiccup happens, it's a snowball effect afterwards.
How do you encourage honest bottom-up communication?
Well, one, you've got to tell them that it can't be a gripe fest. And that's a hard one, because most of the time, whenever you pull them into a room, that's the first thing that it is. So most companies have like a safety committee. And I've actually shied away from calling it that now. I call it a continuous improvement team, a sit team. And I try if I sit on it with clients, I'm like, hey, like if there's a safety person there, like don't say anything. Just sit and observe. See what kind of flows from it. And the first one is exactly what you think it's going to be. It's going to be a gripe fest. And then after the griping is done, it gets to a point where it's like, okay, let's pick one. Let's pick one issue. How do we fix this? How can we tackle this? Let's give some examples. Give me one or two. Give me one or two. Give me one or two. Okay. All right, you give me one or two. The next time we come back in a month from now, I want you to tell me what's been done from here. And once you can kind of give them that and that ownership of it, of, hey, I can hopefully address this so that this doesn't happen again for either my crew or Billy Bob's crew or Jane Doe's crew, like, then it's like, hey, this is working. They're listening to me rather than telling me what needs to happen. And I think once that happens, and I'm seeing kind of a shift across the board really on all industries, it's happening. It's going to take some time.
In the reverse, what do the frontline workers need most from leadership?
A voice. They need to be able to know that they've got someone that both has their back and can listen to when there's a problem, whether it be a small problem that can easily be fixed and they know it can be, to a potential, hey, I see this on the horizon. What are we going to do about this? And if we don't do anything now, this is going to be a major disaster for us, whether it be an accident, an incident, or just damaged goods. So having that kind of like direct line of communication to someone, whoever that individual is, you don't want to put it all on safety, but there's got to be someone there that they can kind of go to in the event of there's a potential for some risk or some safety.
This probably builds off of that one, but like, how do you build trust so communication flows both ways?
You got to have really good frontline supervisors. I think that's the backbone of any industry. It doesn't matter if you're in the trades or not. If you've got really good frontline supervisors, because they're the ones that are controlling everything. They're the ones that are seeing people, manually lift things, or, putting the blood, sweat, and tears into, putting up a crane or tearing down a crane or whatever it is, building a paper clip. They're the ones who see it day to day when the office or executive people are in the office, doing the additional things that are beneficial. So they're the ones that really make the most bang for the buck.
What separates a good foreman or supervisor from an average one?
Communication. It all stems around communication. I mean, I think we could have talked about 55 minutes on just communication. I think it all boils down to, one, they've got to know what they're doing. That's obviously important, but I don't think you have to know everything. I ask the question of like, do you have to know everything to be a good leader? And my response is absolutely not. You can surround yourself with phenomenal individuals that make you look like an outstanding leader. And my example to that is Ted Lasso. Absolutely amazing show. And if anybody has never seen it, watch it, because you can be a coach or a leader who has no idea what they're doing, has no idea about the game of soccer, but is surrounded with amazing individuals, both top and bottom down, that helps them excel. Prime example.
Love that. So true. You don't absolutely need to know everything about the thing. That's what a lot of leaders think that leadership is yep. Like, I got to know everything about this. It's like, no, you just have to be a really good facilitator.
Yeah.
Just be a really good hype man.
Sometimes you got to know, like, what's the biggest problem that I got to deal with? Mm-hmm. This is a major, catastrophic fire, and this is one that I can put out with a fire extinguisher. And if I can do that, I can delegate it to somebody else, and then I can focus on the major top one or two things.
So you've read a shit ton of books. You've been in industry. You've been around a few different companies, cultures, things like that. You've been in the military. What have you seen that builds great culture?
Oh, man. I don't know if it's something that like, it's not just a phrase, right? You go into some companies and they'll have like the banners on the wall, right? And it just says like culture is this, or safety is this, our vision is this. Culture is something that grows as the business grows, whether it be it grows 10x times or maybe 2x times. Culture is this ever-changing understanding of, depending on where we are, both in the market, in the insurance, in the safety, like what is going on in the world, let alone the U.S., like you have to adapt to that. And if you can adapt and adapt quickly, because you don't want to be the last one, but you also kind of don't want to be the first one too, because you can be the first one and make the wrong steps. You gotta
or just be way too early.
Yeah, you got to be a little agile and flexible. So like, I think that it's a tough one to answer because I don't know if I have like the full answer for it. I think it's one of the ideas of like, culture is flexible. Now you want to have a strong culture, but it doesn't need to be so rigid where it's this is the only way we do. It has to move as the company moves.
When you kind of look back over all of this, like maybe your experiences at organizations or your experience in the military, do you have somebody in mind that was like, oh, that dude or that girl built great culture? Like,
oh man,
they were wicked at it. And then if you have that person, like what did they do in specifically that curated good culture?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously I had a lot of phenomenal leaders when I was in the Navy, that just ingrained just leadership and culture across the board. When I interned at both Quanta and the other construction company, the knowledge of those individuals and like, I think it also goes to like, I was hungry. Like I wanted to learn, and I still want to learn too, but like I'm also having to teach. So it's this weird way of like, I can't still be hungry, but I've got to still be hungry enough where like I'm feeding myself, but now I got to feed everybody else around me. So yeah, that's a really, I don't know if I could pinpoint it to just one individual. I think it's just this idea of like, once I understood like what they were really good at, and it was an area that I wanted to learn from, I just attached at the hip and was like, give me everything you got. I want to know why you're good at this kind of thing.
Is it safe to say that in order to build good culture, you have to be a good leader?
I think so. I think you can surround yourself with good leaders and have a good culture. I don't think per se you would have to I don't think you specifically have to be a good leader. But if you surround yourself with good leaders, you can have a good culture.
What makes a good leader? I know it's a topic just like safety, it's like culture, just like communication, like it's a massive topic, leadership. What are some things that make a great leader?
So I'll flip it. What do you think a bad leader is, right? I think a bad leader is someone who tells you what to do, doesn't communicate well, has either maybe a high or a low expectation. Whenever you bring up an idea, they probably shun it down. We probably have this idea right now, if like you ask the audience, like, hey, could you think of 3 or 5 bad leaders where you're like, I never want to be like that person? They're automatically going to know. But when you flip it and think like, what is a good leader? There's probably not that many that can say like, this 1 or 2 individuals has really kind of shaped who I was today. So it's kind of the reverse. You think of the things that you don't want to be as a leader, and you go, how do I get better from not doing that?
What are 1 or 2 of those leaders that helped shape you, and what did they do that you really liked?
Yeah. So, my director right now, he's phenomenal with. When I came into the insurance side of the house, I didn't have an understanding of the insurance. It was a kind of a roll of the dice. Hey, you came from the safety field. We're going to bring you in. And you're going to learn on the fly. And I took that for what it was, and I wanted to learn. And he gave me everything that I could to help get better. And I constantly am asking questions like, hey, am I doing this kind of similar to how you would you do this a little bit differently? And I feel like, I've been in this industry now going on 5 years. So like I've got a pretty good understanding. I'm still fairly green in comparison to most people in my job. Most of them are fairly senior, like 15, 20 years in the industry. So pretty green in comparison. But he's just a great manager, great supervisor of, whenever I have a question, he doesn't just give me the answer. He wants me to kind of walk it and think it out and just talk through the process of like, this is why I want to do it this way. And if there's some ways where he wants to say, did you think about this? I'm like, I didn't think about that. So yeah, that's probably one of the ones I can think of right now.
I dig that. What's your advice then for, okay, so what we're seeing a lot of in industry now, we're seeing it all over globally, is this mass exodus of boomers from the job market and this influx of Gen Z-ish call, that. I was just looking the other day, or I interviewed a couple months ago, Gabe. Asked Gabe, like, mind me asking how old you are? Like, here's a foreman on a major one of Quanta's biggest transmission projects. He's like, I'm 23. I'm like, wow. Like, hard to tell he's a 23-year-old by the way he talks, right? Just he's got this presence and, calmness, stillness about him. Like he's got great leadership qualities already. What's your advice for, maybe some of these like mid-termed generation having to be led by younger folks?
Don't be afraid of it. Yeah. I think it's kind of a stigmatism that we've been used to for a long time, for probably generations. And we've got to kind of get used to the fact that this is going to be the norm. Like we're going to have younger executives. We're going to have young supervisors, young frontline managers, whatever it may be. Like there are good, young, skilled individuals that are in their mid-20s that can be leaders, frontline supervisors, and we need to harness that. Because if we don't, I hate to break it to you, the baby boomers, they're either going to retire or they're not going to be working more. So you kind of get where I'm going with it. Like if you don't accept the change is going to happen whether you accept it or not. And that's kind of the key.
I think it's a great opportunity to change guard too, right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
It gives you, as somebody, see, like, not everybody wants to be a leader, and if you don't want to be, because if you don't want those responsibilities of a leader, doesn't mean that you can't be a leader. In the way, like, you can't just, like, you can lead by passing on what you know, by being that example, all those things, but you don't have to, like, take the actual title and all of those responsibilities of it, but you can still be that person.
I think absolutely. And I don't think, like, the term leader is, like, the same way we look at it as like a foreman or a frontline supervisor. Like just because you're not like giving out the orders, like you could have a simple task of that you take ownership of when it's the middle of August and you're on a project and you're like, hey, I'm going to go get water for the guys. That's being a leader. Or, hey, I'm going to write the tailboard once a week. You are doing things that are leadership traits. You just aren't doing it to 100%, and that's okay. You still need those to have a strong team, because if you don't, somebody else has to take ownership of it, and maybe they don't want to.
I know your answer for this one probably, but what leadership habit immediately improves crew safety?
Oh, it's communication. Yeah, absolutely. I think it goes without saying, like, it doesn't matter if it's safety, if it's operation, if it's procedures, it doesn't matter. If you aren't communicating effectively, it's just going to be a downfall.
Have you seen anybody, like not anybody, but any organization actually have a training program on communicating?
Yeah. So my mentor, Jason Coons, and I'll send you his contact info. He'd be another one you might want to get on board. Sure. when he was with 3M, they used to do kind of like this huge leadership summit for I think either a week or a couple days. That really like talked about like the art of communicating and like what is good communication, what's bad communication, how do you get better at it. They do some really good things. There's some big, you know, Fortune 100 companies that, I mean, you kind of have to. Once you get that big, you have to be able to communicate well. So
I don't know why, but I don't know why people don't implement. It is like the single biggest topic, I think, that people should be paying attention to. Leadership and communication, they go hand in hand. But at least if you're going to have like a leadership program, make a big portion of that program how to communicate.
So I think when you ask that question, most people don't think of it the way that we are. Like, we don't think of it as a communication as a continuous tool to get better. We just look at it as like, I'm sending an email, I'm communicating.
Yeah.
Like, there are so many times where like I pick up the phone and I call a client or I call someone because I need to understand, like, from the horse's mouth, like, there's a drastic difference between an email response and an over the phone response, or even an in-person response. It's so much different.
There's a billion ways to communicate messages, right? And that's why it's like a massive topic. There's ways to do it, and then there's all of the tactical like how-tos.
Yep.
Like, how do you deliver that message?
Yep.
Yeah, I just think it's a massive topic that more people should be trained on. Most people are just like left out to the woods to fend for themselves. I was always also talking about something I learned while putting a keynote together, put my first keynote together. And I had to put a keynote together that was going to be an hour long. So something I developed, you know, stood in front of a live audience of like foreman, supervisor level people, and delivered on a topic or a few topics, right? By myself on a stage. To go through that process, you know, obviously like did some research. One of the biggest things I learned through the research phase was learned about visualization.
Yep.
And I always thought it was like mainly like for athletes, but I was trying to like bring this down to the level of a foreman, a leader, somebody delivering a tailboard. Again, it was a tailboard conversation. I said, it sounds fluffy, it sounds woo-woo, but like honestly, like just in your own time, visualize yourself delivering the tailboard.
Yeah.
And then visualize from the perspective of your crew looking back at you.
How are they? Yeah. How are they getting
do it from different angles. And then when you get in that situation, you're a little more comfortable because your brain's like, okay, I've been here before. Right?
Yeah.
I've seen this. I've done this.
I've had the pleasure to give more than a handful of, they're not really like keynotes, but I've had some clients like
presentations.
Hey, give me some presentations, but it's in front of hundreds of employees, like pretty much keynote, but not a keynote. And
not paid keynote.
Not paid keynote. And I know I did one. There was like 350 of like their entire crews were there, and
that's gonna be $15,000.
I took like they have like a photo of it, and I remember my wife. She's like, "Were you not scared?" And I was like, "No." I was like, I felt comfortable. I said because I understood the message, and if I can relay the message in a way that even just a handful, they take one or two things from, like, that's the goal. Like, they're not going to take away 55 minutes of what I took away. You're going to lose them in the first 30 seconds and gain them back in the last 30 seconds. I was like, so if I can get some peaks and valleys within that where they take away a couple things, then I've hit my mark.
Okay, you've read hundreds of books. Give me a handful of your favorites and like one thing from them that you really enjoyed.
Oh, man. So essentialism talks about being able to say no, like understanding what's the most important. So, you know, being able to, if someone comes up to you or so quickly to say like, yeah, I can do that. And knowing like, it's probably not. Like being able to say, hey, I can't do this today, but maybe tomorrow. With Jocko's, oh my gosh, Jocko's is an amazing on everything. You want to talk about communication? Just read Jocko's books. Yeah. Every single piece of it is communication in that one. I'm trying to think of one from Simon Sinek. Simon Sinek talks about being able to understand like the micro data from the macro data. And that is huge in my world right now, because when I look at data, which is what I look at every single day, I get this macro size standpoint of it, and I have to go 2, 3, 4, 5 layers deep to really find the micro cause of it. So that's another one that I kind of look at a lot too. Trying to think. I haven't been reading a lot of nonfiction books.
On that one for a sec, because you analyze data from incidences that have occurred,
kind of like workers' comp trends. So like I'll get like what's called like a loss run, depending on like what line of coverage, and like I get to look at all of the data. Sometimes it's good data, sometimes it's bad data, and then from that, like I'm coming up with my theory of like, what are your top 5 issues? What are your top 5 frequencies? What's your top 5 severity? Are you having trends on certain days of the week? Is it a certain age demographic? Is it a certain tenure demographic? Is it a certain job occupation? And then like I have to start thinking like, okay, does this mirror up with the industry trends? Like, there's something that's out of the ordinary with it? So like that's where I got to get like a couple layers deep.
Is there any advice or like things from that I could mine that would be beneficial?
As far as what?
Well, beneficial for the audience. Is there anything like they could learn through that process of like investigation?
Yeah. So I tell my clients this all the time: get as much data as you can, and then sift through what you don't need. Because if you only get like a small sample size, you're just limited to that. Mm-hmm. If you can get as much as possibly can, you can throw out the garbage that you don't need, and then go, hey, this is it. This is what we need to focus in on.
What kind of mindset helps people grow versus just get by?
Oh, you got to be hungry. They got to want to eat, and know that even as you grow older, you can still want to get better. So I'm applying for law school now.
No kidding.
Yeah. So
staying hungry. Let's go. Law school. Why law school?
I don't know.
What's your plan?
My wife asked me that question a handful of times.
How many degrees do you have now?
So my undergrad, my MBA, and law school would be my JD. When I get that, I'm trying to get it before I turn 40.
You're so way too smart for me.
I don't know about that. I've since being where I'm at now, I've always been in school. Like when I was with Quanta, I'd finished my undergrad, and then I shortly after that started my MBA, and then I finished my MBA like 2 years ago. So I've kind of like had this timed of, what's next, right? Like I feel
2 years of your life. Yeah,
I got to do something, and I kind of looked at like what a risk person does, like risk management, chief risk officer, like what does that look like? And like I'm fairly close to what is normal, and then I was like, well, what's not normal? Like what if I was going to do something that like would change that, what would it be? And like I deal a lot with like from the legal aspect as far as like contracts, evaluations, things of that nature, but there's a certain point where like I can't add any value. So I was like, maybe it would make sense to go to law school. And it's definitely not like I would be in a courtroom, because there's absolutely no way that I would be a defense attorney. Like, because there's just no way. I'd look at the judge and be like, Your Honor, I'm sorry, but he's an idiot. But so like I think there's facets of it that like I could definitely use from a day-to-day standpoint, especially as I get older and have more time within the industry. So that's kind of like my new thing that I'm trying to tackle.
Crazy. Okay, one last one. In as short as a sentence or whatever that you could deliver, give the best piece of value that you think you could deliver to the audience.
All right, I got it for you. I wrote it down because I knew it was going to be. All right, so this was kind of like my philosophy on safety and risks. So effective risk management transforms data into meaningful action, creating a culture that prevents losses, protects people, and drives down the total cost of risk. Now, we could have had like an entire conversation just around that, but I think that is kind of like where I look at safety and risk, and they're really two different facets of it, but when they intertwine, that's when a company really has a strong culture.
Go into it just a little bit deeper. Explain that a little bit deeper.
So when we look at safety and risk, safety is just kind of the day-to-day, and the risk is everything that's involved with it. And we are getting better as organizations grow and they communicate better. Those two and two are getting closer to align. And as they align, we're able to like truly say like, okay, this is a safety hazard. These are the risks that come along with this. And it's a slow process. Not a lot of companies do it well, but those who do it well are exceptional at it.
Sick. Thanks, dude. Appreciate it.
Likewise.
This content is completely free. All right. The only thing I'm asking you for is to hit that subscribe button. And I know it's cheesy. I know it's corny. I know every YouTuber asks you to hit that button and you're probably sick and tired of it. But if you like the show and you want to see the show grow, this is the way I prove to the people in charge that it's worth investing in. So it's pretty simple, and it's the price you can pay for me. It's no money. It's just a subscribe. Please hit the subscribe, and I appreciate the heck out of you for it.